Welcome back to the show where I find my voice in between crashing out and finding my voice again. The Nostalgia Critic, if he started his show in 2017, a mixed race character! I think the neo-Nazis pissed off enough of their own conscripts when they've basically collapsed. A big thing that's been going on recently is the Israelification, the Mossadification of a lot of the neo-Nazi groups, and I think you can see it. It's a big with the Russian-Ukraine split, right? That was a big one. So you had your like Israeli-friendly neo-Nazis in the Ukraine sector, and then you had your like European white nationalist, anti-Rothschild, well-studied faction of the neo-Nazis. I'm not saying that everybody that believes what I just stated in that sentence is a neo-Nazi, but that is the more well-educated, high-aura neo-Nazis who were unequivocally pro-Russia. And they should be. You know, why shouldn't they be? And that was a huge split. But with just recently, like, the lines have been drawn pretty firm in the sand, and I'm pretty sure the neo-Nazis are collapsing pretty hard, which is good, you know. People should take the stance of being pro-Christian instead of like, pagan fire worship, like a pseudo-pagan fire worship, right? Because they took the whole, the Germans, the Celts, and the Slavs were experts at fire cycles of forests, and they applied that to worshiping fire, and that's where you get a lot of the book burnings as, like, rituals. And I'm not saying that every single book burned was a good book, right? But there were good books that were burned depending on where they were written in order to rewrite history, and that's also the problem with a lot of forms of more aggressive authoritarian fascism, right? It is what it is, you know, low aura fascism. Read Julius Evola if you want to get into high aura fascism. That's pretty deep right there. That's young levels of deep. You know, something that I don't quite understand is how our politicians allow themselves to be blackmailed into doing things worse than what they're blackmailed for. Sexual impropriety isn't as evil as killing thousands of children with our military equipment. And we already ignore courts. At a certain point, just like how Biden genuinely loves Zionists for like 30 years, he's been on record for saying he loves the modern, or postmodern, if you will, state of Israel. As in, he loves malignant Zionism. And he's also been on the record. He was the person who said that if there wasn't a state of Israel, we'd have to create one. I'm pretty sure he was the one who said that. He might have been quoting somebody else, but he said that. He's been on record a lot for 30 years as being one of the most pro-Zionist politicians, and it really goes to show. And, you know, they just got to admit that they're just in it for the love of the game. You know, Biden got nothing. He got spit on. And he still is just like, thank you so much, sir. I'll give you whatever you want. That is so wild. And then when they killed a couple Americans, he's just like, okay, we're going to slow down on the 2,000-pound bombs because those might be causing collateral damage. And then his legacy in the Zionist media is that of like a betrayer. It is so ironic and so funny. Not really funny, but funny in like a sad clown floating through space, irony poison sort of way. And Biden is genuinely worse than Trump. I don't care what you say. I'm looking at the entire thing. I've been paying attention to all of this for a very long time. I've been paying attention to Israel since 2014. I see the entire board, and Biden took us closer to World War III than first-term Trump. It's his fault Israel is emboldened, and Ukraine is dead. Dead. They are not a real country anymore. They're now being occupied by foreign forces. Kiev is already like an international hub. And Ukraine is dead. Ukraine proper, dead. Still, I cannot believe we are pissing all over South Korea and Japan's loyalty with these universal tariffs. I cannot believe that. I really, really was thinking, because it looked like he was saying that Trump was not going to tariff South Korea, because why would you? Or Japan, because why would you? That's actually going to have genuinely bad side effects. That above anything else will break the United States hegemony. And you know what? If you're one of those people who are okay with that, then this is probably your shining moment, right? So maybe calm down instead of getting like I got insulted by one of my far left friends by saying that writing off the South is regressive and only aids the people that he doesn't like. The guy's just on like completely psychotic rants constantly, and he just says, "Cousin fuckers." Like, oh, okay then. Thanks. It really helps. You're really helping people. You're really helping to aid the innocent people. That's the mentality of Antifa. It's just like you get plugged into online news networks that's very similar to what older people are plugged into when they're plugged into Fox, but it's like, horseshoe theory extremes, and that turns you into a insurgent for these particular movements that only end up serving the enemy in the long run. There's nothing that the government fears, the establishment, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. There's nothing it fears more than a unified, peaceful population willing and brave enough to take a stand for tomorrow. They are terrified of that. Absolutely terrified of that. The two most industrious countries in the East per capita, South Korea and Japan. And now they're siding with China, which they've already announced. I'm not making that up. And another thing, there's zero doubt in my mind that a very vocal minority of brainwashed individuals were cheering in Germany when they were decimating Poland, when Derlewanger was burning barnfuls of Polish Catholics alive. But the entire world recoiled in disgust. So too is our destruction of Gaza. Lie to yourself all you want, but that is exactly how everybody on the entire planet is responding, and we are isolating ourselves and isolating ourselves and isolating ourselves. Pretty soon it will be nothing but, a new axis of evil starring Britain, Israel, and America. That's going to be the new axis of evil. You think Iran is the axis of evil? Iran is one of the only countries in the world that does not have a Rothschild bank. You want to know one of the only other countries in the world that doesn't have a Rothschild bank? Russia. Want to know why our decimated, raped, destroyed, hateful, self-defeating country is trying to destroy those two countries? It's because they're working, functioning, happy countries. They're raising families, doing decent, and the people that want to deplete the population of the planet to 1 billion or less, poison everybody except for the Eloys, and keep a slave caste of Murlocs down in the gutter. Those people hate Russia and Iran. And they're not perfect. Of course they're not perfect. Why would Iran be perfect after the United States couped their government and put in the Shah? They waged a World War I style trench war against Iraq. At our behest, we funded Iraq, we funded Iran, just as the Bush family funded the Nazis, funded the Allies. It's that simple. It is not some complex Rubik's Cube. You only have to do a couple of turns to figure this one out. I hope Biden dies and he depersonalizes and his soul flows up into the ether. He experiences firsthand all the pain and torment he has unleashed. I hope all the Gazan babies and children block his way to heaven and send him hurtling down to hell. People on the left really need to stop calling the Zionist a parody of white supremacy actual white supremacy. It's just insulting. It's insulting to language. I've explained how white is a Calvinist term denoting spiritual purity, and how the theosophists that spawned Nazi ideology are connected to Zionist through a tangential common anthroposophist root, which theosophy spawned anthroposophy, but anthroposophy is very similar to the Aryan ideology, whirling log ideology, which is to say the the sun symbol comes from the Far East, but actually, we're all connected through this, that, and the third, and then the Japanese are connected too through the Saiyan mountain ranges, and that's exactly where you get Saiyans from Dragon Ball Z, and that's exactly why they go blonde hair when they get more powerful. You see, that is anthroposophy, and it's all fine and good and dandy when it's in Dragon Ball form, because we love it, and it's wonderful. Well, Dragon Ball Z form, I'm not a big fan. I'm more a fan of the directing in the Dragon Ball was a little strange, a little hypersexual. I remember that when I was a little kid. I was like blushing watching some of that. But the artwork is gorgeous. And of course, Dragon Ball Z, near and dear to the heart of every single like Gen X, millennial, some Zoomers, near and dear to our hearts. Near and dear. Like true American culture, true Pan-American culture. Every time a new Dragon Ball Super episode came out, the cartels drastically dropped in their killings because they were watching the new Dragon Ball episode. Something that could unite everybody, one of us, and rest in peace, Akira Toriyama. But yeah, back to the Zionist parody of white supremacy. Calvinism is white is a Calvinist term denoting purity, how you would be baptized in the purest waters of Lake Geneva, and therefore you are the highest level of saint and highest level of blah 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 blah. That actually is the root of anthroposophy, and anthroposophy also is why people who try not to be douchebags struggle sometimes when it comes to making fun D&D concepts. I'm not saying Gen 5 is good. Gen 5 is bad. Bad. But they've struggled because it's just like, why do the orcs always have to be mean, and why do the dwarves always have to be spiteful, and why do the elves always have to be pricky, and why do the humans always have to be like normies and stuff like that? That everybody is hard locked to certain things because of their race, right? That is something that comes from anthroposophy, and as I said, Conan the Barbarian traces all the way back to Lovecraft. Lovecraft traces to Germanic, poorly translated, mistranslated Germanic and Celtic mythology. So this all has deep roots, right? And we all know how racist Lovecraft was, so it's like there's a common theme there you can trace all the way down. But, I'm getting tangential on this point. Is a big point. However, nobody has been more hateful of white people than Israelis. Nobody. No black person has been more hateful towards white people than Israelis. They are only extremely hateful of white people when Israeli culture gets in their head. The Israelis were the biggest slave traders. So, Abraham Lincoln is probably the furthest thing you can get from a Zionist. Nobody hates white people more and wants to just destroy European culture more than the Zionists. And that's exactly why the long-term scheme that was worked through the drug addict Adolf Hitler, who did have Riz and did have aura and was a rock star and was a good public speaker, but at the end of the day was manipulated and died in his bunker while everybody else fled with the bag, especially as scientists, as rocket scientists, his other scientists brought in through Operation Paperclip to the United States, is because the entire goal was to collapse a non-Rothschild bank-owned nation, just as the same that when Napoleon established the Banque de France, a nationalistic bank meant to serve the French people, he was exiled, killed with Rothschild poison, which is the Rothschild special poison back 400 years ago was arsenic. And 300, 400 years ago, 500 years ago. It goes back pretty far with those assassinations. And they just obliterated France, even though, it was trying to revive itself from the Jacobin revolutions. Squishing wheels. The Israelis, they literally call Europe Edom. I've heard them say this before a lot. Edom is an Iron Age kingdom in northern Arabia, and it was denoted as a permanent enemy, right? So where you get the Talmud is these original noble Hebrews who still had their issues. As I said, they murdered an entire village under Roman protectorate, and to get purged from that portion of the Middle East, they fled into Babylon, 400 AD. Babylon, I wouldn't call it captivity. The captivity came before with Nebuchadnezzar. This is just the Babylon migration. And they picked up the Talmud, and they picked it up from Babylonian alchemy. That alchemy came over from the Far East, but it's very likely that there was more of a connection. And as I've said, the Egyptian script and the Far Eastern old pre-Bone Oracle writing system were like similar hieroglyphics that developed very similarly until East Asia went completely their own way when it came to the structuring of their kanji and the other, whatever the Chinese call their writing system. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But it originally started off the same as Egypt. So that entire band of the Silk Road was like one contiguous culture, just as Eurasia was a contiguous culture that happened later after more melting of ice happened. And the Proto-Indo-Europeans and Yamnaya went up and formed the Mongols and formed the Scythians and went into Europe and formed the Europeans. They took the wheel from India 30,000 years ago, formed carts, lived out of their carts, brought carts, horses, oxen, chickens, which originally came from like northern Vietnam, over to Europe and formed European society, you see. That's just, I'm sorry, that's just what it is. If you think that like people spawned in Europe or whatever, you got the wrong history in your head. I'm sorry. Yeah, they call us Edom. And they quite literally I form this opinion, I firmly believe that they want to rape and or murder all non-converts just because you have a handful of deeply convicted neo-Nazis who are mostly brown. This is not a white supremacist make. They're not a white supremacist culture. They're not white. And, I mean, people say Calvin, Cohen, this, that, and the third, but it's the same gene-stealing, culture-stealing, hollowing out. It's not true. The same goes for pseudo-fascism, right? It's a hollowing out of culture. It's not a true culture. Can we get it through our collective psyche that these Drukari homunculi are not good buddies? Anyways, lower German and Scandi girls are real pretty, but Upper German and Dutch girls are absolute stunners. And that's because, I think, due to the Celtic admixture having enough of it to avoid the perils of inbreeding. Celtic culture is more romantic, too. It takes things a little bit slower. It appreciates things a little bit more. It's a little bit more peaceful than German culture, which I think the German culture's speciality comes from like an extreme drinking culture. You'll see this in the 6th Legion of the Space Wolves in Warhammer 40k. Like, they really embodied Viking drinking culture, how everybody got just super drunk, and like the leader would get the most drunk. Like, a leader in German society would be the person who can drink everybody else under the table. And they get to drink nice mead instead of the grog that everybody else had to drink. But that goes back to the Celts. That goes back to Celtic society. Libertarians just want weed and guns, right? But anarcho-capitalists are the sort of people that want to fire any nurses and doctors that won't completely ignore things like anal lacerations in children, left or right. You see it on both sides. Anarcho-capitalists. And a lot of people use that term without recognizing what that means. Anarcho-communists on the left, anarcho-capitalists on the right. It's suspicious that they all have these, child sex crimes looming as specters all around them. Quite the coinky-dink, huh? I don't think so. I think it's more simple than people say. I'm a globalist. There's so many good people in this country that have fought so hard to do the right things, but who are also tired now and refuse to participate in the commiseration of their own country. And I hate to say it, but one of the reasons why Elon was willing to go to war over the H-1B visas things is because a lot of these people have already been replaced by Indians. Now, I'm not saying all Indians are bad. I've some of the best doctors I've ever. That's one of the reasons why I was kind of on board with H-1B visas for a while, until I started to look at the bigger picture and realize why they actually want H-1B visas. Not just for a lower wage, but because of the psychotic, selfish, low IQ nature of a lot of the people they're hand selecting for these jobs is sociopathic in European society would be considered abnormal and be considered completely normal. I've read the Kama Sutra multiple times. There's some abnormal stuff in being a good Indian countryman. Very strange stuff in that book. Although it is worth a read, because there's some fascinating schizo stuff in there. Like, really, truly, genuinely schizo. If you want some genuine schizo reading material, read the Kama Sutra. It's not a sex book. There's a portion of sex in there, but like most of it is like instructions on the spokes of society as the things that they valued the most and wanted to replicate in order to create, this contiguous wheel. Dharma wheel, Elon's just atheist, Muhammad. You're holding one of the worst bags, but at least you can feel martyred. Come on. I know everybody's really sick of hearing me talk about Elon, but come on. Like, seeing what the news has done and seeing him doing what he wants to do for enough time has convinced me he is quite literally one of the most evil people in our country right now. And the reason why is because he's tangentially attached to Israel. So is Javier Milei, the winner of the 2024 Genesis Award. And the entire goal is to dismantle these countries in any way outside of the support of Israel. And that's exactly why the military is getting even more money and even more power and even more rocket facilities. Like, we're not doing cool stuff in space. We're not making, orbital, more space stations, orbital space stations, beautiful, gigantic, collaborative things with people. We're not making it, so get it out of your head that that's ever going to be a thing under this current path. He's just as evil as Fauci, right? Dude has tortured so many monkeys to death. Attempting and failing to make the Neuralink. It's not good. For anybody confused about Hawk Tuah pardon, it's simple. She was working for a production company. That production company scooped her up immediately, told her everything to do, told her how to play the game, and afterwards, she's not liable because that production company is in network or paid the right bribes to the right people in order to get pardoned with all the rest of the crypto bros. I think Shkreli was one of them. I wonder what... Oh, gosh. Bankman-Fried. I wonder what Bankman-Fried's up to. I wonder if he's getting a pardon. That'd be wild, man. Wow, wow. Wow, wow. Deadly drinking game. Take a shot every time a YouTube thumbnail says it's over or he's done. For the 50th time about the same person. Or contains a little curvy red arrow pointing to a red circle. Do not do this. Your liver can't take it. Oh. By the way, don't use the word laconic unless you live in the remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire or write 40K novels for Black Library. We say brief in the Western world, or concise, or succinct, but we don't say laconic. So don't say it. Good advice. Strive to get your news in as condensed and accurate a form as possible. Text is best. You gotta hope that people can change for the better. Even if they're completely screwed up in the present, you gotta pray for your enemies. Writing people off as if they lacked free will is weakness. Going back to my, left-wing friend, he's just writing people off, in red states. That's not right. People are not a monolith, especially Americans and all the freedom that we enjoy and all the sloppiness of our culture, It manifests some crazy awesome things, it manifests some crazy disgusting things, and we all know it. You can't just write off huge swaths of people. Nobody who does that from the left to the right to the center is good. That's why I say there's good people everywhere. There's also bad people in every good group. I've purported for years that Darwinism is a cheap substitute for free will inducing voluntary change. And Darwinism says it's random mutations, whereas I say that the choices made creates epigenetic memory that passes down into genuine change based on necessity. Based on the necessity induced by the choices made by the ancestors. That's what I personally believe. And you know what? I don't hate the Mormons, though I insult them if they allow themselves the inglory of becoming the biggest warmongers on the Christian spectrum. Crusader states caused grievous wounds to the Eastern Roman Empire and Christendom as a whole. As I've gone into, the Knights Templar formed the first global bank. They were very likely the seed of the Rothschilds back when, the people in Rothenburg were very poor compared to their areas around them. They allowed for a festering wound to form in Christendom and to have this Iron Age selfish, self-centered, self-absorbed, non-constructive, non-community-based culture to arise back up, get smacked down by the Vatican, arise in the Lutheran sphere, get smacked back down by the 30 Years' War, arise back in the Portuguese backbone of the slave trading empire, which was originally started by the Knights Templar. You got the Knights Templar for the global slave trade. The Arabs would do slave trading all over the place, but the global slave trade was created in its skeleton by the Knights Templar, and then it was really taken off by the Portuguese. Then Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand banned the Jews from Portugal, and then the slave trading empire of the Portuguese massively collapsed, but it went to the Netherlands. House Orange and the Dutch, they're the ones that took in all the Jews, and they formed the Dutch East Indies trading empire. Afterwards, it was quite literally sold in a business deal to London, and that created the East Indies Company. And it's the slave trading empire until George III, a great man who lived a very long life, banned slavery in England. And then eventually we banned slavery from a great man, Abraham Lincoln. You gotta be careful with these Crusader states. A lot of the Crusader states in Spain were pretty noble, and they were honest, violent, somewhat defensively violent against the Andalusian Emirate or the Cordoba Caliphate, whatever you'd like to call it, Reduced it down to Granada and then squeezed it all the way out. Although a lot of people from the southern part of Spain are still Granadan by blood, and that's a lot of the people that they sent over to occupy Mexico proper, not the other Spanish states. So you've got a lot of complicated, a really big amount of complicated blood in Mexico. Big complications there. Mayan, Zapotec, Olmec, if they're still around in any way, shape, or form. And then the Nahuatl, the Aztecs, and their sister kin. Very, very, very violent people who had datura, angel trumpets, a hardcore delirium as their sacred, their priests' ritualistic imbibement. That delirium, that insanity, that doom created the Nahuatl religion as a religion of human sacrifice and squeezing of the environment, in increasing of the population in the area, caused them to cannibalize each other and just send people off to die. When Our Lady of Guadalupe came and was consecrated, the metropole of all of the Americas, the people who were brought with her, brought pigs, and those pigs were the subsistence of the people in Central America after that, and they didn't need to cannibalize each other anymore. A lot of them gladly and happily converted and now are some of the best and most dedicated Christians, but have been under attack by the global drug trade that is so prevalent in Central and Southern America. And I hate to say this, but if Trump doesn't get Benjamin Netanyahu out of his ass, that's not going to get fixed under this administration. It's just not. I'm sorry. But hey, something more positive. Might I suggest Mole Monastery for a genuinely wholesome and passionate Christian perspective? I absolutely adore Father Seraphim Aldea. His lessons are oftentimes a communion, and Mull is a beautiful place, and Iona is a beautiful place, over in the Hebrides in Scotland. All right, y'all. This one's probably pretty long. Yeah, 30 minutes. All right. Hope everyone has a good one. I've had a great one today. A little less sweaty. Sorry about being so sweaty recently. Cheers.